The evening rush was just beginning at the Grand Crest Hotel, a tall, elegant building that stood glowing against the city lights. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee, perfume, and polished wood. The restaurant on the ground floor was filling up with guests, businessmen talking loudly over drinks, couples celebrating anniversaries, and families enjoying fancy dinners they didn't often get to have. The clinking of glasses and soft background music mixed with the sound of footsteps and laughter. Among the waitstaff moving quickly between tables was a young woman named Maya Thompson. She wore a neat black uniform with a white apron and her hair tied back into a simple bun. Her steps were quiet, but her eyes were always alert. She carried trays gracefully, smiled politely at customers, and spoke softly when she took orders. Most guests hardly looked at her twice. To them, she was just another face in the crowd of hotel workers. But behind that calm expression, Maya's thoughts often drifted far away, to a time before she wore that uniform, to a world filled with music. Maya had once been a student at a music conservatory. She played the piano, not just played but lived through it. When her fingers touched the keys, the world disappeared, and she could feel her emotions flowing out as sound. Her teachers used to say she had a gift, something rare. At 18, she dreamed of traveling to new cities, performing on stages, and making her mother proud. But life had other plans. Her father passed away suddenly, leaving behind debts and unfinished promises. Her mother fell sick, and her younger brother was still in school. The tuition at the conservatory became impossible to pay. One afternoon, she packed her sheet music into a small box and walked out of the practice room for the last time. She told herself it was temporary, that she'd return once things got better. But that was 3 years ago. Now at 24, she worked double shifts at the Grand Crest Hotel to make sure her mother's medicine was paid for and her brother could finish college. Every month, the bills arrived like clockwork, and so did the weight in her chest. Even so, Maya carried herself with quiet dignity. She was never rude, never careless. Her coworkers liked her because she was reliable. When someone fell sick, she covered their shift. When a guest was difficult, she handled it calmly. But there was one thing everyone noticed about her. Whenever she passed by the grand piano in the ballroom, her eyes would linger for just a moment. She never touched it, but she always looked. The hotel used the piano mostly for events, weddings, conferences, and private parties. It sat there like a sleeping giant, covered by a dark cloth most of the time. But when the lid was lifted and the pianist began to play, Maya always paused for a heartbeat longer than she should. Sometimes, after closing hours when the restaurant was empty and the lights dimmed, she would stand near the piano just to feel close to it. She'd run her fingers lightly across the edge, never daring to press a key. It reminded her of what she once had and what she still longed for. Her best friend at work, a cheerful waitress named Carla, often teased her. "You look like you're in love with that piano again," she'd whisper. Grinning as she wiped a table, Maya would smile faintly. "Maybe I am," she'd reply. "Then why don't you play it sometime? The manager wouldn't mind if it's after hours." Maya shook her head. "No, it's been too long. I probably forgot how to play properly." But in her heart, she knew she hadn't forgotten. Music never leaves you completely. It hides somewhere deep, waiting to be woken up. That Friday evening was busier than usual. The hotel was preparing for a grand corporate party the next night, a gathering of wealthy clients and important business owners. Decorations were being set up, lights were being tested, and the kitchen was buzzing with preparations. Maya had been assigned to help serve at the event, which meant an extra long shift, but she didn't complain. She needed the overtime pay. When she returned home that night, her mother was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a soft blanket, reading an old book. The small apartment smelled of soup, and the TV played quietly in the background. Her younger brother, Ben, was at the kitchen table working on his laptop. "You look tired, sweetheart," her mother said gently as Maya hung her coat. "I'm fine. Mom, just a long day," Maya replied, sitting beside her. "They're hosting some big event tomorrow. I'll probably come home late." Her mother smiled, though her eyes looked worried. "Don't push yourself too hard. You've been working every day this week. I'm okay, really. And the extra money will help with your checkup next month." Ben looked up from his laptop. "You're seriously amazing, you know that?" "I don't think I could handle what you do." Maya laughed softly. "You just focus on your studies. That's how you'll help us." Later that night, after everyone went to bed, Maya sat by the small window of her room. The city lights flickered outside and the sound of distant cars drifted through the half-open window. On her nightstand lay an old, slightly yellowed piece of sheet music, her own composition from years ago. She had written it when she was 17, inspired by the sound of rain on her roof. She picked it up, tracing her name on the corner of the page. She could almost hear the melody in her mind, each note soft and warm. For a moment, she imagined herself back on stage under the bright lights playing her heart out. Then she folded the paper gently and put it away, reminding herself of where she was now. Dreams were beautiful, but reality needed her more. The next day, she arrived early for the event. The ballroom had been transformed. White tablecloths, crystal chandeliers shining, and tall flower arrangements everywhere. The grand piano sat near the stage, polished and perfect. A professional pianist was rehearsing, and the sound of the keys filled the hall with elegant music. Maya couldn't help but slow down as she walked by. The melody was nice, but it felt distant, mechanical, too practiced. She missed the emotion in it. Real music, she thought, should make people feel something deep inside. The pianist stopped to take a sip of water, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. He gave her a polite nod before returning to his practice. Maya quickly looked away, embarrassed to have been caught staring. She hurried to the staff area, pretending to check her tray. As the hours passed, the hotel filled with guests arriving early, planners giving last-minute instructions, and staff running around to make sure everything was perfect. Maya worked quietly, helping set tables and arranging glasses. Carla hummed beside her. "You think the people at this party will tip well?" Carla asked. Maya smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I just hope no one spills red wine on the white linens." They both laughed softly. By the time evening came, the ballroom was glowing. The guests began to arrive, men in dark suits, women in elegant dresses, the air thick with perfume and chatter. The sound of laughter and music blended together. Maya moved among them silently, serving drinks, collecting empty glasses, and offering small smiles when someone thanked her. She could feel the rhythm of the room, the rise and fall of voices, the soft clinking of forks, the laughter that came in waves. Near the piano, the hired musician played background pieces, his fingers moving skillfully but without passion. Still, the guests seemed pleased, too busy talking and laughing to notice the music deeply. Every now and then, Maya caught herself looking toward the stage. Her heart ached not with jealousy but with longing. She didn't crave attention or applause. She missed the feeling of losing herself in sound. That invisible thread that connected her to something greater than herself. Around 9 o'clock, there was a small break. Maya stepped into the staff hallway to rest for a few minutes. She leaned against the wall, sipping water from a paper cup. Carla joined her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You holding up okay?" she asked. "Yeah," Maya said softly. "Just a little tired," Carla smiled. "You always say that. You're like a machine." "I wish," Maya said with a quiet laugh. "Machines don't feel tired or worried." They both fell silent for a moment. From the ballroom, faint music drifted in. Maya closed her eyes, listening to it. "You ever feel like you're supposed to be somewhere else?" she asked suddenly. Carla shrugged. "Sometimes. But then I remember rent's due next week." Maya laughed again, though there was a sadness behind it. "Yeah, I guess that's how life works." When she returned to the hall, the pianist had finished another set. He stood up, stretching his hands, and walked toward the lounge area. The piano sat quiet, waiting. Maya passed near it, balancing a tray of glasses. The light reflected off the polished surface, and for a second she saw her own reflection. A tired young woman who once had big dreams. She smiled faintly at herself before walking away. That night, after the event ended and the guests left, Maya helped clean up. The once busy ballroom was silent now. Chairs pushed in, lights dimmed. The pianist had gone home and the piano sat under a half-closed lid. The air still carried the faint scent of champagne and perfume. Maya stopped beside the piano again, her hand hovering just above the keys. The room was empty except for a few staff members collecting tablecloths at the far end. She glanced around quietly, then reached out and pressed one single note. The soft sound echoed gently through the hall. It was almost like the piano was waking up. She smiled, a small private smile. Carla, walking by, heard it and turned with a grin. "Caught you," she whispered. Maya laughed softly. "Just one note." One note today, Carla teased. A whole concert tomorrow? Not likely, Maya said, shaking her head, though her eyes were shining a little. When she finally left the hotel that night, the city air was cool and quiet. She wrapped her coat tightly around herself and began the walk to the bus stop. Her shoes clicked softly against the pavement. Somewhere in the distance, a street performer was playing an old keyboard. The tune was uneven but heartfelt. Maya stopped for a moment listening. Then she smiled and kept walking, her heart both heavy and full at the same time. She didn't know it yet, but life was about to surprise her in a way she could never imagine. The following evening, Maya entered the Grand Crest Hotel feeling a familiar weight on her shoulders. It was the night of the corporate event, the one everyone had been talking about for weeks. The air inside the hotel was different tonight. It felt heavier, charged with an excitement that she couldn't quite place. It was a luxury event, a gathering of some of the wealthiest and most influential people in the city. Everything had to be perfect. She slipped into her black apron and uniform in the staff room, adjusting her collar as she mentally prepared for the long night ahead. The ballroom had already been transformed. There were rows of glimmering white chairs, each draped with satin covers. Long tables were covered with glistening silverware, crystal glasses, and delicate flower arrangements. It was beautiful, and the hotel management was intent on making it flawless. Maya had seen plenty of extravagant setups before, but tonight felt like something more, like a world she didn't belong to. The staff was already running around, prepping, setting up, and rehearsing their roles. Carla was talking with a few other waiters near the kitchen, but Maya was left to gather her thoughts for a moment. She couldn't help but glance over at the grand piano standing near the stage, its polished surface glowing softly under the chandelier light. It looked perfect, untouched, like a work of art. She felt an odd pull toward it as if it were calling to her, but she quickly shook her head, dismissing the thought. She was just a waitress now. Piano and dreams were in the past. "Hey Maya, you good?" Carla's voice broke her out of her trance. Maya smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yeah, just a long night ahead." Carla raised an eyebrow. "You don't have to do this alone, you know. We're all in this together. Thanks. I'll manage." Maya's voice was soft, and she turned to start her rounds. Carla watched her go, but Maya didn't notice. She was too focused on what lay ahead. The first few hours of the event felt like a blur. The guests started arriving, their chatter growing louder as they filed into the ballroom. Maya moved swiftly between tables, taking drink orders, serving appetizers, and trying to stay out of the way. She was so used to it now. The polite smiles, the forced pleasantries, the almost invisible way she moved through the crowd. She didn't mind it. She had grown used to being overlooked. Sometimes she preferred it that way. But tonight, she noticed something different. There was a tension in the air, a buzz of anticipation. The higher-ups from the company were arriving, all sharply dressed in tailored suits, looking important. The hotel manager was overseeing every detail, making sure everything went perfectly. In the corner of her eye, Maya saw the piano once more, and she felt that familiar tug. She sighed quietly and moved on to the next table. She had a job to do, and tonight wasn't about her or her feelings. It was about the guests, the event, and making sure everything ran smoothly. But when she entered the ballroom a little later with a tray of drinks, she saw the manager talking urgently with the event organizer. His face was tense, his eyes darting around the room as he scanned the area. "What's going on?" Maya asked Carla, who was passing by with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. Carla looked over, frowning. "Not sure. The pianist is sick or something." "They're freaking out about it." Maya stopped for a second. "What?" "But the piano—" "I know," Carla interrupted, lowering her voice, "but they need someone to step in." She raised an eyebrow. "Can you play?" Maya's heart skipped. She shook her head quickly. "No, I mean, it's been years since I've even touched a piano. I don't know anything anymore." Carla stared at her for a second. "But you did play, didn't you? Back when we worked together at the cafe?" "Yeah," Maya said, her voice quiet. "But that's not— It's a pretty big event, right? They need someone. Why don't you at least go check it out? You never know." Maya wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. Play the piano? In front of all these people? It wasn't even a thought she'd entertained in years. It was a whole different life, a whole different person who had once dreamed of stages and applause. Not her. She wasn't that person anymore. but the uncertainty in Carla's voice made Maya hesitate. She looked back at the manager, who was still pacing nervously near the stage, clearly at his wits' end. He caught sight of her and waved her over, his face tight with stress. "Maya," he said quickly, "I need you to do something." She felt a knot form in her stomach. "What's the matter?" "The pianist, he's sick. He can't continue." He ran a hand through his hair. "Do you know how to play?" "Just a couple of songs. We don't need anything too fancy, just background music." Maya froze. Her first instinct was to say no, to turn him down and walk away. But then she remembered all the times she had stood beside that piano, longing to play, feeling like a part of her was missing. She remembered the music, the freedom she'd once felt when her fingers danced across the keys. She hadn't forgotten how to play, not really. But was she ready to do it in front of a room full of strangers? She hesitated, but the manager's expression was desperate. He was waiting for her answer, and in his eyes, she could see the weight of the event's success resting on her shoulders. "I can try," she said quietly, the words slipping out before she could stop them. The manager gave a sigh of relief, nodding quickly. "Perfect, thank you. Just don't worry. Keep it simple. Don't worry about anything too complex. Just play something light." Maya nodded, though she wasn't sure she could keep her hands steady. As she walked toward the piano, the room seemed to get quieter. She was already feeling the eyes of the guests on her back. Her heart raced in her chest and her palms began to sweat. But she couldn't back out now. Not when she had already said yes. When she reached the piano, she took a deep breath and lifted the heavy lid. The keys were cold beneath her fingertips, but as soon as she touched them, something inside her stirred. She closed her eyes for a moment, recalling the years of practice and the music that had once filled her soul. She couldn't remember everything, but some of it was still there, just beneath the surface. The sound of the notes echoed through the ballroom, soft and tentative at first. She hesitated before she started playing a simple melody, a piece she had learned long ago. The room quieted as the sound of the piano filled the air. Maya's fingers moved hesitantly at first, unsure, but then they began to flow with a natural rhythm. She was surprised by how easily the notes came back to her, like an old friend who had never truly left. The soft sound of the music seemed to settle her nerves, and she started to feel more confident. She was no longer just a waitress in an apron. She was a musician again, even if only for a few minutes. As the song continued, Maya glanced up at the guests. Their conversations had slowed, and some of them were now watching her, their eyes focused on her every movement. She saw a few of them exchange glances, their interest piqued by the unexpected performance. But Maya didn't care. She lost herself in the music, letting it carry her away from the stress, the expectations, and the nerves. For the first time in a long time, she felt like herself. The song ended, but Maya didn't stop. The notes seemed to flow effortlessly from her fingers, one song blending into another. It was as if she was telling a story with every chord, a story only the piano could speak. She glanced up again, noticing that the room had gone completely still. Guests had stopped talking, some even standing a little closer, entranced by the unexpected beauty of the moment. For a second, she let herself imagine that she was back at the conservatory, performing in front of a full hall. She imagined the applause, the feeling of success. But then the reality of the ballroom returned, and she focused once more on the music in front of her. As the last note lingered in the air, the applause came. It was hesitant at first, unsure of what they had just witnessed, but it grew louder as the guests realized what had just happened. Maya blinked, surprised, and slowly stood up from the bench. She gave a modest bow, feeling the warmth of the room's appreciation. Then, before she could second-guess herself, she stepped away from the piano, handing the room back to the waitstaff in the busy atmosphere of the event. She moved back into the crowd, her heart still racing. But the applause hadn't been for her. It had been for the music, the surprise of it, the magic of a forgotten skill brought back to life. She wasn't sure what would happen next. The applause slowly died down, leaving a strange silence in the air. Maya stood frozen near the piano, her heart pounding in her chest. Her fingers still tingled from touching the keys, and she felt a rush of emotions, confusion, disbelief, and a strange warmth that spread through her chest. She had only meant to play a few simple pieces to fill the gap, but something had happened, something unexpected. She hadn't just played for the crowd. She had felt the music again, just like she had when she was younger. For a brief moment, it felt like everything in the room had stopped moving. as if the music had created a small separate world where time didn't exist. When the applause came, she wasn't sure what to do. It was soft at first, almost tentative, as if no one could believe what they had just heard. But it grew louder, and soon people were standing, clapping with real enthusiasm. Maya glanced around quickly. Her eyes caught the manager's, who was standing near the entrance of the ballroom, looking at her with wide eyes. He gave her an approving nod, though his face was still a bit pale with worry. Maya couldn't tell if he was relieved that she had saved the situation, or stunned by the fact that the quiet waitress had just turned into the star of the evening. Before she could even process what had happened, the pianist who had originally been hired appeared at the back of the room, looking a little unsteady but still trying to smile. He was holding a drink in his hand, clearly trying to act as though nothing had gone wrong. His eyes landed on Maya at the piano, and for a moment his face tightened just for a split second before he quickly masked it with a polite smile. Maya felt a flash of discomfort. She hadn't meant to take his place. She hadn't meant to cause any trouble. But for a moment it seemed as though the room had forgotten all about the original musician. The applause was for her. She quickly stepped away from the piano, muttering a soft thank you as she moved toward the edge of the room. The applause continued for a few seconds longer before it slowly died out. People started to go back to their conversations, but a few lingered, glancing in her direction with curiosity. Maya felt the heat rise in her cheeks. She wasn't used to attention, especially not this kind of attention. She had always been the one on the sidelines, observing, not participating. As she moved through the crowd, her mind began to race. She had played piano in front of people before, when she was younger, during recitals and concerts. But those were organized events with a different kind of expectation. This was completely different. She had played because she had been asked, but in that moment, it felt like something bigger. For the rest of the evening, Maya kept her head down, doing her best to blend back into the background. She carried drinks, took orders, and smiled at guests when necessary. But all the while, she couldn't stop thinking about the piano. She couldn't stop thinking about how easily the music had come back to her, as if it had been waiting for her all this time. She had thought she'd left it behind, but now, she wondered if maybe she hadn't truly let it go after all. It was only when the event began to wind down that she allowed herself to breathe. The guests were starting to leave, their laughter and chatter filling the hallways as they said their goodbyes and made their way to their cars or taxis. The hotel staff was already cleaning up the ballroom, stacking chairs, folding tablecloths, and clearing away the last remnants of champagne glasses and napkins. Maya wiped her brow, exhausted but oddly relieved. It had been a long night, but it was almost over. As she passed the piano one last time, she stopped, her hand resting lightly on the edge of the instrument. The grand piano looked almost forgotten now, its polished surface slightly dulled by the evening's chaos. Maya stared at it for a moment, her breath catching in her throat. She didn't know why she was still standing there. She had played her part. The night was over, but something in her was still drawn to it, still connected to the music. It was then that she heard a voice behind her. "You were incredible." Maya turned to find the hotel manager standing there, his hands shoved in his pockets, a broad smile on his face. He seemed genuinely impressed, almost surprised. Thanks," Maya replied, feeling a little awkward. I didn't think it was that good. I just played something simple." "No," he said, shaking his head. "It wasn't simple. I can't tell you how many people have asked about you already. They were all asking who you were and where you came from. It was unexpected but incredible." Maya blinked, surprised by his words. She wasn't used to this kind of praise. She had always been the quiet one, the background character in someone else's story. She never expected to be the one anyone talked about. I wasn't trying to." "I know," he cut her off gently. "But that's what made it so special. You didn't perform. You just played. And that's what everyone noticed." Maya didn't know how to respond. She wasn't sure she even understood what he meant. She had simply done what she knew. She had played because it was what the event needed. And somewhere in the middle of it, she had found herself again. That was all. But hearing it from him, hearing it from someone else, made it feel different. "Thank you," she said a little too quietly. She didn't want to get too caught up in this. It was just a one-time thing, wasn't it? It didn't change anything. "Listen," the manager said, his tone softening. If you're interested, we're always looking for musicians for events like this. I'm sure you could make some extra money doing what you love. It would be a good opportunity, especially with the way you played tonight." Maya felt a rush of nerves at his words. She hadn't thought about it before, but suddenly, the idea of playing professionally, of getting paid to do what she loved, felt both thrilling and terrifying. She had spent so many years believing that part of her life was over, that she couldn't go back to it. But now, standing here in this grand hotel, the thought of returning to music didn't seem as impossible as it once had. "I don't know," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "I haven't played in so long. I don't even know if I'm good enough." The manager looked at her thoughtfully. "You're good enough," he said firmly. "Trust me. I saw it tonight. If you want to do this, you can, and I'd be happy to help you." Maya felt the weight of his words settle in her chest. She didn't know what to say. She was overwhelmed, both by the sudden possibility and by the fear of stepping into a world she had once walked away from. Could she do it? Could she really go back to music after all this time? Before she could respond, Carla appeared by her side, her smile wide and bright. "You okay?" she asked, looking from Maya to the manager and back again. "What's going on?" Maya blinked, her thoughts scattered. I don't know. He just said, I don't know what to do." Carla raised an eyebrow. "He's offering you a chance to do what you love, isn't he?" Maya nodded slowly, her mind racing. It sounded so simple when Carla put it like that. But it didn't feel simple. It felt like a risk. "A huge risk. You should take it," Carla said softly. "You never know what could come of it." "You've been waiting for something like this to happen, haven't you?" Maya thought about that. She had been waiting, hadn't she? Waiting for a sign, for a chance. She had spent so many years pushing her dream aside, convincing herself that it was unrealistic. But maybe it wasn't too late. "I'll think about it," she said finally, still uncertain but not as afraid as she had been before. The manager smiled, clearly pleased. "Take your time," he said, his voice kind. "But don't wait too long." As he walked away, Maya stood there for a few moments longer, her thoughts still swirling. She felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. It wasn't the same as before, but it was there. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough to begin again. The next few days passed in a blur of conflicting thoughts for Maya. She found herself lying awake at night, thinking about the manager's offer. It seemed like such a big decision, one that she had never imagined she would face. After all, she had walked away from music years ago. It wasn't something that had a place in her life anymore, or at least that's what she had told herself. But now, the possibility of playing again was like a spark that wouldn't go out. Maya spent most of her days at the cafe, pouring coffee, making sandwiches, and running around taking orders. But her mind kept wandering back to the piano, back to the notes she had played so effortlessly at the event. Every time she closed her eyes, she could still hear the sound of the keys under her fingers, the soft flowing music that had brought the whole room to a standstill. For the first time in years, she felt alive. For the first time in years, she felt like she was in the right place, doing something that mattered. But at the same time, she couldn't shake the nagging fear in her stomach. What if it wasn't the right choice? What if she wasn't good enough anymore? She hadn't played in so long, and the thought of standing in front of an audience again, of performing, made her feel vulnerable in a way she hadn't felt since her younger years. One evening after her shift, Maya sat down at the piano in the small studio apartment she rented. It was nothing fancy, just a simple upright piano, worn in some places but still functional. The keys were chipped, and the wood had faded from years of use, but to Maya it was still a place of comfort, a place where her soul could speak. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, feeling the coolness of them under her touch. She had been avoiding playing for so long, but now it seemed like the only thing that could make sense of the whirlwind inside her. She took a deep breath and began to play, a simple melody that she used to practice in her younger days. The notes came back to her quickly, and before she knew it, she was lost in the music again. It felt good, almost like slipping into a warm bath after a long day. The world outside the room seemed to disappear, and there was only her and the piano. For a moment, she forgot about everything, the doubts, the fears, the uncertainty. She forgot about the cafe, the long hours, the small paycheck, the life she had settled into. But as the song ended, reality came rushing back. She stopped playing and pulled her hands away from the keys, the sound of the final note still hanging in the air. She sighed, closing her eyes for a moment. What was she doing? What was the point of this? Playing alone in a room wasn't the same as standing in front of a crowd, wasn't the same as performing for a paying audience. She wasn't the same person anymore. She stood up from the bench, her heart heavy with indecision. As she walked away from the piano, she couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. There was a part of her, a big part, that had always longed for something more. Music had been her dream once, but life had pulled her in a different direction, and now it felt like that dream was too far out of reach. Over the next few days, Maya continued to wrestle with her thoughts. She hadn't made up her mind about the manager's offer, but the idea kept gnawing at her. It was as if she couldn't escape it. Whenever she closed her eyes, she saw herself back at the piano, playing effortlessly, the applause echoing in her ears. But then the doubts crept in. What if she couldn't do it? What if the music wasn't there anymore? What if it was just a fleeting moment of nostalgia? At work, her thoughts were scattered. She found herself zoning out during conversations with customers, distracted by the growing uncertainty. She hadn't told anyone about the manager's offer, not even Carla, who had been so supportive during the event. It felt too big, too important to talk about. Maya wasn't sure she was ready to face it yet. She wasn't even sure if she was ready to face herself. It wasn't until a few days later, when the manager showed up at the cafe unexpectedly, that Maya finally had to confront the decision. He walked in casually, as if it was no big deal, but Maya's heart skipped a beat when she saw him. "Maya," he greeted her with a warm smile, his eyes twinkling. "I was hoping I could talk to you for a moment." Maya wiped her hands on her apron, feeling a bit flustered. She had known this moment would come, but she wasn't ready for it. She had been avoiding it, hoping it would somehow go away. But here it was, standing in front of her. "Sure, what's up?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I wanted to check in with you about the offer I made," he said, his tone calm but purposeful. "I know you've been busy, but I just wanted to see if you had given it any thought." Maya swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. She had been thinking about it nonstop, but now that he was standing in front of her asking for an answer, everything felt much more real. She took a deep breath, trying to gather her thoughts. I don't know," she said finally, her voice quiet. It's been so long. I don't even know if I can do it anymore. What if I'm not good enough?" The manager smiled gently. "Maya, I've seen you play. I know what you can do. The question is, do you believe in yourself? Do you think you can step back into this world even if it feels a little intimidating at first?" Maya looked at him, feeling a flicker of something, maybe hope, maybe fear, stir within her. She didn't know what to say. How could she explain the way her heart had broken when she left music behind? How could she explain the years of doubt that had slowly crept into her mind, convincing her that it was too late? "I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of commitment," she said finally, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "I've spent so many years just getting by. I'm not sure I can handle going back to something that meant so much to me. Something I might not even be able to do anymore." The manager nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I get it. It's a big decision, and I'm not saying you have to jump into it right away. But what I'm offering is a chance to start small, a few performances here and there. You don't have to decide everything today, but I think you owe it to yourself to at least try." Maya stood there, the words echoing in her mind. What if he was right? What if she was holding herself back out of fear? What if the only thing standing between her and what she truly wanted was her own doubt? Maya started, but she trailed off, unsure of what to say next. The manager smiled warmly, as if he could read her thoughts. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. Just think about it. You can always come back to me if you change your mind." Maya nodded slowly, her heart still heavy with uncertainty but also strangely light, as if the weight had shifted just a little. She wasn't sure where this would lead, but she knew one thing for sure. She had to stop running from it. She had spent so long avoiding the things she loved, but maybe it was time to stop being afraid. As the manager turned to leave, he paused at the door and looked back at her. "Whatever you decide, Maya, I believe in you." His words stayed with her long after he left the cafe. She stood behind the counter, staring out the window as the late afternoon sun cast a warm glow over the streets. For the first time in a long time, Maya felt like she had a choice. It wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about living. The music wasn't gone. It had always been there, just waiting for her to find it again. The question now wasn't whether she could play. It was whether she could allow herself to try. The days that followed felt different for Maya. There was a subtle shift inside her, like a gentle but insistent nudge pushing her forward. It wasn't a sudden change, but rather a slow realization that something had to give. She had been walking in circles for years, trying to ignore a part of herself that refused to stay hidden. That part, the one that longed for the music, had been tugging at her heart for so long, and now it seemed ready to be set free. Maya had decided to take the manager's advice. She wasn't ready to dive headfirst into the world of professional performances yet, but she could at least take small steps toward rediscovering her love for music. She spent the next few weeks playing at home, letting her fingers glide over the keys, allowing the music to flow freely again. Each time she sat at the piano, she felt a little more like herself, a little more whole. But the fear was still there. It whispered at the back of her mind, telling her that it was too late, that she wasn't good enough, that people would see through her and realize she didn't belong in this world. She was just a waitress after all. The idea of being more than that, of stepping onto a stage again, felt like a dream that didn't belong to someone like her. Despite these doubts, Maya found herself agreeing to a small performance at the hotel. It wasn't a huge event, just a private gathering for a corporate dinner, but it was enough to get her feet wet. The manager had promised her that it would be low pressure. No one would be expecting anything extraordinary. He just wanted to see if she could handle playing in front of a crowd again. Maya felt a mix of excitement and anxiety as the day of the performance approached. She had practiced her pieces, choosing a few that she was comfortable with, songs that felt like old friends. Still, the idea of playing in front of strangers made her stomach churn. What if she froze? What if her fingers didn't obey her? On the night of the performance, she arrived early, dressed in a simple black dress that she had bought just for the occasion. The manager greeted her as she entered the ballroom, giving her an encouraging smile. "You're going to do great," he said. "Just relax and play like you did at the last event." Maya nodded, but she wasn't sure if she could relax. Her nerves were getting the best of her, her hands already trembling slightly as she made her way to the piano. She could hear the low hum of conversation as the guests filed into the room, their voices a soft murmur in the background. The lights were dimmed, the chandeliers casting a warm golden glow over the space. Everything looked so elegant, so polished. It was the kind of place where people dressed up, where everything felt important. She took a deep breath and sat at the piano, her fingers brushing over the keys as she prepared herself. The manager gave her a reassuring nod from across the room, and she tried to focus on the task at hand. The first few notes were shaky, but as the music began to take shape, Maya felt the familiar comfort of the piano. She let herself slip into the rhythm, her fingers moving more confidently as the song unfolded. She had done this before many times. She knew how to play. She just had to trust herself. At first, the audience was quiet, their attention focused on the music. Maya couldn't see their faces from where she sat, but she could feel their presence. She could hear the soft murmur of their voices dying down as they listened, as the music took over the room. The song flowed effortlessly, and as she reached the final few chords, a wave of relief washed over her. She had done it. She had played through the entire piece without stopping, without freezing. Her hands were steady now, the music no longer a source of anxiety but a connection to something deeper inside her. As the last note echoed through the ballroom, Maya looked up, her chest tight with anticipation. The room was silent for a moment, and then, unexpectedly, the guests erupted into applause. Maya's heart skipped a beat and she blinked in surprise. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected anyone to respond so warmly, so enthusiastically. Her face flushed with warmth as she gave a small, shy smile and nodded her thanks. The applause continued for a few moments, and Maya could feel a smile creeping onto her face. The nerves that had once felt so overwhelming were now replaced with something else, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. She took a deep breath and played another piece, this one more complex and daring than the first. As her fingers moved across the keys, she felt more confident, more in control. This was what she had been missing. This was where she belonged. By the time the performance ended, Maya was almost in disbelief. The nerves had faded, replaced by a sense of accomplishment. She had faced her fears and come out on the other side stronger than she had expected. The manager was there as soon as she finished, his smile wide and genuine. "You were amazing," he said, his voice full of admiration. "I knew you had it in you. Maya laughed softly, still a little stunned by the positive reaction. I didn't expect that kind of response, she admitted. I thought I'd be more nervous, but once I started playing, it felt right. The manager grinned. That's the magic of music. It has a way of pulling you in and making everything else disappear. I'm so glad you came back to it. Maya's heart swelled at his words. She had come back, hadn't she? She had stepped into the unknown, and somehow it had worked out. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she had made the right choice. The rest of the night was a blur of congratulations and compliments from the guests, and Maya found herself smiling more than she had in ages. She had done it. She had proven to herself that she could still play, that the music was still a part of her. As the evening came to a close, the manager approached her once more. I've had a few people ask if you'd be willing to perform again. There's a regular spot opening up here at the hotel. Would you be interested? Maya's heart skipped a beat. A regular spot? The idea of performing regularly was both thrilling and terrifying. She hadn't expected anything like this, but at the same time it felt like the next logical step. I'd like to think about it, she said, her voice a little shaky but hopeful. I'm not sure I'm ready to commit to something so regular, but maybe. The manager nodded, understanding. Take your time. Just know that the offer is there if you want it. Maya smiled, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. For the first time in years, she didn't feel stuck. She didn't feel like she was just going through the motions of life. She felt like she had a choice, like she could make something of herself again. That night, as she lay in bed, the sound of the piano still echoing in her mind, Maya felt a deep sense of peace. She wasn't sure where this new path would lead, but she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer afraid to follow it. She had rediscovered something that had been buried deep inside her for so long, and now she was ready to embrace it. S.A.